We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! Percy Jackson crossover here. What if Naruto and Athena had two daughters? Being a single father with two little girls is hard enough, but when there are monsters trying to kill them every day, it's even worse. Well, he loves them more than he loves himself, so he would just have to hope for the best and pray to the mothers of his children. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 1. He had never felt such power. It was overwhelming and beyond his wildest imagination. His body felt as if it had been turned to stone. He couldn't move a muscle as the calamity towered over him, its shadow covering most of the mountain range. It wasn't moving, but every subtle twitch of its body sent quakes along the ground and shook the foundations around him. Its mouth was closed, but a low rumble came out as its growl. Then there was its eye, its one lone eye. It was as red as blood with strange black rings and tomo surrounding pupil, and it emanated power. But despite all of this, he felt no fear. Perhaps it was because he had nothing to lose. Everyone else had perished, crushed by the beast's overwhelming power. Pools of blood covered the ground, forming into rivers as the foundations of the earth shook. Hundreds upon thousands of corpses lay still or burning on the dirt. With his sensory abilities, he could still feel the lingering chakra of some of his most precious people. He could feel their life fade as their deaths sunk into his consciousness. He was the only one left. Everyone else had perished, he had failed to save any of them. I'm sorry. The ground shook heavily and he was nearly knocked to the ground as the monster took its first step. Its 10 towering tails were swaying from side to side, threatening to flatten any person or mountain within its reach. Its mouth slowly parted, revealing jagged and razor-sharp teeth covered in its slimy saliva. It looked hungry, not for food, but for death and destruction. It only wanted one thing, to destroy every living thing in the world and start anew. He stared up at the beast with his azure blue eyes connected to its lone powerful orb, and wondered. Is this really the end? All this time I had thought that I could become powerful enough to save everyone. Even if I could defeat the Jubi now, what's the point? So I can be the king of the ashes. Suddenly, a deafening, earth-shaking roar of devastation blasted from the beast's gaping mouth, sending gales of neck-breaking winds towards the corpse-covered land. It shredded the ground and tore away at the remaining earth. Then as it breathed back thousands of small red and blue orbs of chakra gathered around its mouth, slowly forming a gargantuan orb almost as big as its body. It was almost pitch black in color, and was suffocating. Why should I fight on? There is no point anymore. A shockwave that shaved off the top of the surrounding mountains pulsed from the monster as it fired its attack directly at the lone survivor. The ground was split open by the sheer power of the speed it was traveling and soon towered over the man. Maybe I should just die. A blinding light covered the entire mountain range and all was silent. A pair of azure blue eyes snapped open and a man burst from his bed. His breathing was quick, as if he was close to hyperventilating, and cold sweat covered his bare torso. His entire body was shaking and he could actually feel the adrenaline slowly leave his system, rendering him tired and weak. What the hell was that? He slowly calmed from his nightmare and combed his fingers through his blonde hair, making it even more spiky than usual. He felt that his scalp was moist from sweat, making him shake his head and sigh. He had never experienced such a vivid and horrific dream. In all honesty, he was surprised his brain could even conjure up such imagery. Putting on his glasses before looking over at his clock, he saw that it was still early, only 5 a.m., making him sigh again. He was wide awake, and despite his weak and tired form, he'd doubt that he would be able to fall asleep again so soon. He simply pushed his pillow upright and leaned back against the headboard of his large bed, letting the silence and peaceful darkness relax him. As usual, his gray curtains were parted and the moonlight seeped in, casting a serene white light in his bedroom. Seeing the familiar placing made him relax more, and he calmly closed his eyes to rest. That's it, no more crazy hero movies before bed with the girls. After a few more minutes, he decided to just start his day. No longer with shaky feet, he stepped onto the cold but cozy hardwood flooring and heading towards the master bathroom. He jumped into the shower and turned the water to higher heat than usual. He could feel his exhaustion leave him as his skin tingled and eyes clear. He spent much more time standing under the shower than usual, trying to rid himself of the worst nightmare of his life, or what he could remember of his life. In his memory, he had only lived 12 years. He was in his late 20s, but he couldn't recall anything before his 16th birthday. The earliest memories were of him waking in the local hospital and the doctor informing him of his car accident. Apparently he had been in a head-on collision with another car and had broken nearly every bone in his body. The doctors were genuinely shocked that he managed to wake from such devastating injuries. It was nothing short of a miracle. But he had suffered a serious case of amnesia and could barely remember how to speak. It took him quite a long time to finish his recuperation in the hospital, but he could survive on his own 18 months later. He started to regain some of his knowledge, but no substantial memories of his past life. All he of himself was from the wallet the police found on his person the day of his accident. His name was Namikaze Naruto, and he was a citizen of New York City, United States of America. He had a driver's license, a social security number, even a gym membership, but other than that, nothing. He had no family or girlfriends. He was alone, well, for the first year anyway. Man, today is going to be exhausting. Naruto jumped out of the shower and dried himself before looking in his mirror. His hair was growing quite long, the bangs nearly framed the sides of his face and most of his forehead, but he saw something weird. For a split second, he saw that his eyes morphed into the same eye the monster had in his dream, but it was gone as soon as he noticed. Shaking his head, Naruto chuckled to himself as he squirted some toothpaste on his toothbrush. I am going to crazy. He dressed himself in his usual style. He had on a black dress shirt with the top few buttons open tucked into a pair of light gray jeans with a white belt. Slipping into his black socks, he stepped into his black dress shoes, hearing the usual clacking footsteps of his own. Stepping down the hall of mahogany hardwood, Naruto turned to the last door on the left. With a gentle turn of the knob, he silently slipped into the teddy bear and plushie-filled room. He smiled at the sight of his little princess sleeping away with all the innocence of the world, her little face pressed against her pink pillow while her blanket was kicked off the bed. It's time to wake up, sweetie, Naruto whispered as gently as he could before he kissed his little girl's forehead, making her squirm with a groan. Come on, Lacey. 5 more minutes. No, that will just make you sleepier. Naruto smiled and lightly brushed his daughter's own long blonde hair behind her ear. Come on, you have to get ready for school. Lacey slowly opened her eyes, though she had a pout on her face. She gave her daddy her most innocent puppy-eyed look and raised her arms up. Can you carry me, daddy? Naruto sighed with a suppressed smile. Sure, you little minx. The little girl, even at 5 years old, still fit perfectly in his arms. Cradling her close to his chest, Naruto rested Lacey's head in the crook of his neck and kissed her head. He made sure to rub his hands along her back so she wouldn't be cold after leaving her warm bed and quickly placed her down in front of the bathroom. Annabeth promised to brush my hair today, mumbled Lacey as she rubbed her eyes. I know, I'm right here. Annabeth Namikaze stepped out of her own room already showered and dressed for school. At the age of 9 her maturity was far beyond her years. Good morning, Dad. Naruto smiled at his eldest and kissed her forehead. Morning, Annie. He ran a hand over her combed blonde hair that she shared with him and her little sister. Help your sister get ready, I'll make some pancakes. Yay! Exclaimed Lacey, with vanilla syrup. Sure. Dad, you still have to sign that permission slip for me. I already did, sweetie, it's on the table. Naruto furrowed his brows as he ran his hand through his hair again, something he would do if he would feel stress. He hated leaving his daughter to go around the city on a field trip, but Annabeth had him wrapped around her little finger. But as much as he wanted to deny it, he was a little happy. What dad didn't want to be bossed around by his darling little princess? Naruto smiled at the thought of his 2 princesses as he started on the pancakes. They were so much like their mothers it was a little shocking. He would never forget the eyes of his first love back in his college days. Yes, he actually went back to college. After his recuperation, he found out that his past self had already started on a business administration degree at the New York City University, and he managed to learn his way back in. That was also when he met Annabeth's mother, Athena, one of his professors. When one would hear such a name they would usually think of the ancient goddess of Greece, not a living goddess of Western civilization. It was real. Athena, Annabeth's mother, was really a goddess. He really had a hard time believing it when the goddess of wisdom had told him of her true identity. He had thought she tried to prank him. Though it was even harder to believe that even though he did not get laid, he ended up having a daughter with his gorgeous professor. Apparently, Athena was capable of having children with men she could connect with at a mental level, like Naruto when they shared a very nice semester together discussing warfare tactics. The blonde had no idea where he had so much knowledge about wars and how to win them, but apparently it was enough to impress Athena. So much so that she decided to have his child. Naruto smiled at the thought. She gave me one of my princesses. Annabeth was Naruto's life. From the moment Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and Athena dropped the little bundle into his arms, 9 years ago, she will forever be someone he would love unconditionally. She was the perfect blend between him and her mother. She had his blonde hair and slightly tanned complexion, but had Athena's intimidating and endearing gray eyes. His daughter was perfect. It smells great, Dad. Annabeth walked into the kitchen and sat down at the dining table, smiling at her daddy as he cooked his usual great breakfasts. Wow, finished with Lacey's hair already? From what Naruto knew about his youngest princess, it surprised him that Annabeth managed to satisfy Lacey's standards for her hair in such a short time. Even at such a young age, Lacey loved to be pretty and cute. Yep, I've had lots of practice. Naruto scooped the first batch of pancakes onto a plate and placed it on the counter. Annie, no books at the dinner table. He gave his daughter a knowing stare, making her sigh in defeat before she placed the book she hid under the table on the table. You will have plenty of time to read later. Annabeth pouted at her dad, but I was getting to the good part. I don't care, no reading at the dinner table. Naruto smiled at his princess. Be a good girl and I'll take you and your sister for ramen tonight. The girl instantly grinned and nodded. Okay. If there was one thing the girls really inherited from him, it would be his love for ramen. Daddy, Daddy. Lacey came running out after she finished dressing, looking absolutely adorable in a little blue sundress with her hair tied into a small braid. I'm hungry, is breakfast ready? Yes, yes, come get your own plates girls. Annabeth and Lacey both happily ran for their own plates before quickly sitting back down at the dinner table. Naruto smiled at the sight of his little girls devouring their breakfast, or of Lacey drowning her pancakes into vanilla syrup. Lacey is also very much like her mother. Naruto didn't know what was wrong with his life or why he was so lucky, but he had had 2 goddesses in his life. The first of his relationships was with Athena, but that was purely intellectual, he had never even kissed her once. But the second was very different. While Athena was confident, smart, and gave off an aura of authority, the second goddess in his life was playful, seductive, and extremely stunning. She had met Naruto when she visited his work, Sweet on America, a candy store he opened after he finished school. It was just a small store located at the end of Grand Central Station, but one day this extremely beautiful woman walked in. She was stunning. Naruto froze the moment he laid eyes on her. She was the definition of beauty. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and that included Athena. She had long red hair that reached her lower back and the face of an angel, and her eyes was a shade of purple that made his heart flutter. He could still remember how excited she was when she practically skipped into his store, leering at all the candy like a predator. It was only a few minutes after she walked in that she told him her name, Aphrodite. Normally when a person would meet a woman named Aphrodite, they would think of her as joking or something, but after having a brainchild with Athena, Naruto grew suspicious. He asked her right away, "Are you a goddess?" Well, let's just say they got along very well very quickly. He showed her all the candy in his shop and they chatted the day away. Long story short, Lacey arrived a short few months after. Slow down, Lacey, the pancakes are not going anywhere. Lacey have her daddy a big smiled and nodded. It's just so good. Naruto sighed as he sipped on his cup of coffee, wondering if he would ever see the mothers of his children again. He had never seen either of them again after they dropped off their respective daughter to him. Athena gave him a sweet smile and a hug before she just vanished. Aphrodite's parting gift was much more intimate and steamy, but she had not shown herself to him afterwards. They both just vanished from his life, never appearing to him again. To be perfectly honest to himself, he felt a little depressed. Maybe I should find a girlfriend. Good elementary school, the one place Naruto loathed. It wasn't necessarily a bad school, but Naruto hated leaving his daughters alone for such a long time. If he had more time on his hands, he would homeschool them himself. If there was one thing he would always remember of the gods, it would be the moment when Hermes had told him that demigod children will always be in danger. As they grow and as their powers develop, they will emanate a scent that will attract all kinds of monsters around the world. That is the main reason Naruto hated leaving his princesses alone. Did you bring your lunch? Yes. What about your extra juice box? Yes. Do you remember what I told you? Never leave the group, always follow your teacher on your field trip. Yes. Remember to wash your hands when you have the chance, those museums are very dirty. Yes. Remember to not read your books when walking around. Yes. Remember, Dad. Cried Annabeth with a slightly red face as she glared up at her daddy. I remember everything, stop reminding me. She felt a little embarrassed at her dad's constant overprotective nature, especially when they were all walking up to the school and there were many other kids with their parents around them. She could hear some of the other kids' moms smiling over at them, whispering how sweet and loving her father was. I'll be very careful. Lacey, who was holding onto her daddy's hand as they walked, giggled. Annabeth looks funny. Annabeth held onto the straps of her backpack and tilted her face up, looking high and mighty. I'm almost 10 years old, Dad, you don't have to be so protective. Naruto smiled at his princess trying to act grown up and how she looked shockingly like her mother. No matter how old you are, you will always be my cute little princess. He kissed her lovingly on the forehead before he messed with her hair. Now be careful and be sure to be here when I pick you up later. Annabeth was blushing from embarrassment, but smiled back nonetheless. Okay Dad, see you later. The father watched his eldest walk into the building before he continued to his way to the kindergarten section of the school. He smiled at some of the other parents as he walked past them, most of which were women. It was a little disconcerting for him to receive strange leers and lustful glances from the other parents, especially since their children were right next to them. Even Lacey seemed to sense something and pulled him along faster. She didn't like the looks those women were giving her daddy. Okay princess, remember to listen to your teacher. Naruto leaned down to kiss her little princess on the cheek, smiling as she giggled. I'll come pick you up in the afternoon. I know, bye-bye daddy. Lacey hugged her dad around his legs and grinned up at him. I love you. Naruto smiled and kissed her forehead. I love you too, sweetie. He smiled as he watched his little girl skip into her classroom, happy to see all her friends again. He was about to leave for work, but someone stopped him. Mr. Namikaze. He turned around and was surprised to see Lacey's teacher walking towards him. It was a pretty sight. Ms. Turner was beautiful. She was a young teacher, probably one who just finished her education degree and wanted to try teaching kindergarten. She had long brown hair that reached her lower back and was very pretty. Nowhere near Athena or Aphrodite standards, but as far as normal humans go, she was gorgeous. Good morning, Ms. Turner. Naruto smiled and met her halfway. What can I do for you? Please, just call me Katie. The teacher smiled with her green eyes sparkling. We had another meeting last night and decided that we need some volunteers to help with day-to-day operations, so I was wondering if you would have some spare time sometimes. Naruto actually felt happy at the news. I would love to help out, just give me the time and date and I'll try to arrange my work around it. Katie smiled approvingly and nodded. That's great. That being said, if you don't mind, can you please help me with something now? Now. The blonde looked down at his watch and shrugged. Sure, I have a little bit of time. Thank you so much. Katie reached for his hand and started to lead him into the school. I am supposed to bring these boxes of worksheets and coloring books to the classroom, but they are really heavy and I can't lift them. Well, I'm happy to help, said Naruto, wondering if she would let go of his hand anytime soon, not that he minded having a pretty girl holding his hand. They walked through the hallways of the school, which were mostly scarce of people since class had most likely started already. Katie was still holding on to Naruto's hand as she led him towards the back of the school, where most of the files and papers were in storage. They turned the last corner and was met with a double door, which Ms. Turner unlocked swiftly. Just these boxes in here. Naruto nodded and stepped into the room, but didn't see any boxes, only a wall of shelves. Where did you say the boxes were? Suddenly the sound of a door closing could be heard and Naruto turned around to see Katie leaning against the door. She had a mischievous smirk on her face, nothing like the sweet smile she would usually have. Is everything okay? You smell really nice today. The blonde felt a little weird and just nodded. Thank you. Without any warning, Katie walked up to Naruto and kissed him hard on the lips. He was shocked and his eyes were wide, but he couldn't deny how great her lips felt against his. She pushed him to the back of the room, his back knocking down some of the files on the shelves. Her tongue forced its way into his mouth and darted around wildly, as if trying to taste him fully. To top it all off, she took Naruto's hand and placed it down her shirt, making him fondle her chest. To say that Naruto was shocked would be an understatement. Ms. Turner looked like a perfectly elegant and calm young lady, but now she resembled more of a vixen. Her eyes turned into a cunning and vicious glare instead of the usual kindness. He couldn't kiss back, she was far too forceful and violent. He could feel her nails digging into the back of his neck and her teeth were starting to bite into his tongue. It was one of the worst kisses he had ever experienced. "Ms. Turner!" cried Naruto as he shoved her off. "What the hell is wrong with you?" The woman was laughing and it sent chills down Naruto's back. It sounded so weird, so evil. Then the real frightening changes happened. Her healthy tan skin started to morph into gray and crusty layers, her brown hair turned white and became wild, and her eyes turned black. One of her legs started to shake and quiver, and soon Naruto noticed that it had been replaced by a wooden peg. Then there were her fangs, they were like those of a vampire. Naruto stared on in horror as he backed into the shelves. What the hell are you? Her voice came out as raspy and manic. "I'm Vilai, an Impauzai." "A what?" demanded Naruto loudly. Vilai moaned as she smirked, revealing her black teeth and elongated fangs. "You smell so good today." She reached up to her chest and fondled her now crusty breasts in ecstasy. "I thought it was only your daughters who I wanted to feed on, but I was wrong. You smell so much better." Hearing the monster mention his daughters knocked Naruto back to reality. "You stay away from my daughters," he said lowly, his anger palpable. "Ha ha 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 ha." Vilai clutched her stomach as she laughed crazily. "You will be the main course today, and little Lacey will make the perfect dessert." Naruto gripped his fists until his knuckles were white, glaring at the monster. "Die!" The Impauzai launched itself towards Naruto, its long nails threatening to run through Naruto to keep him still. Her mouth was salivating as her eyes gleamed with hunger. Now any normal father would probably piss their pants as the monster charged at them, but Naruto was not exactly normal. Quickly reacting, Naruto reached back to one of the shelves and used the top shelf to direct himself as he jumped up. Almost reaching the full height of the room at 9 feet, Naruto looked down at the monster, which was shocked at his actions, and kicked her as hard as he could in the face. The force of his kick forced the Impauzai to stagger back to the edge of the room, slightly disorientated. "I'm going to kill you, monster." If there was one thing Naruto knew that he excelled at, it would be fighting. He charged at the monster, grabbing its long white hair with his left hand and pulled its head into his right fist. He heard a distinct crack before he kicked her once more, sending her back to the wall. Naruto glared angrily at the Impauzai as he ran up to it and grabbed its head. He dug his fingers hard into her hair and slammed its head into the wall as hard as he could, denting the drywall instantly. Naruto knew he needed a tougher surface to slam the monster's head into, so he turned to the steel shelves and slammed again. But the Impauzai used its legs to stomp on Naruto's foot and hind kicked him away. It turned to glare at the slightly winded blonde man with its face bleeding badly. "I'm going to give you a slow death." Its raspy voice was shaking with anger as its nails grew in length. "Not if I can help it." Naruto sped for the fire extinguisher and quickly used it to hit the Impauzai in the face. He repeatedly slammed the extinguisher against the monster's face, making it cry out in pain every time. He didn't count how many times he had struck the Impauzai, but he didn't relent until his arms wouldn't move anymore. Vilai lay on the ground, still alive. This is impossible. No human should have such strength. Naruto didn't want to take any chances and quickly stomped on the monster's chest. "Just die already." He slammed the fire extinguisher straight down on the monster's face, crushing it against the cement floor. He did it again and again, ignoring the cries of pain and wails coming from the monster. He closed his eyes and just let his strength guide him, and it continued on. Then suddenly, Naruto felt his weapon hit the ground instead of the monster's head. He quickly opened his eyes to see if it had escaped, but sighed in relief when he saw a pile of gold dust on the ground, just like the hellhounds did last time. He sighed in exhaustion and sat down on the ground, dropping the dented fire extinguisher to the ground. I knew today would be a bad day. Sweet on America was Naruto's pride and joy. He had opened it a year after his graduation with his life savings and it had been going fairly well. It was located inside the Grand Central Station, and business was improving over time. Many people find it a good idea for some sweets after lunch or dinner, and his shop would be a nice convenient place for them to visit after getting off the subway. It varied from young adults working nearby or children with their parents, but they would all leave his store with smiles on their faces. That was what really made Naruto love his job. Candy and sweets are universal, just as Aphrodite had told him. He stepped into the red, blue and white themed store and smiled when he saw that there was already a line in front of his register. "Good morning, Mr. Namikaze." "Good morning, Sally," said Naruto as he smiled at his best employee. "Sorry for coming in late, but it's been a hectic morning." Sally smiled and waved him off. "It's perfectly fine, I've got this under control." Sally Jackson had been working for Naruto for almost a year already and she was a great employee. She worked hard, was punctual, the customers loved her, and looked beautiful in the store uniform. Another good thing was that her son was also a student at Good Elementary and was a friend of Annabeth. "Did you drop off Percy this morning?" asked the owner of the store as he walked behind the counter and started the other register to ease the lineup. Sally nodded with a smile. Yep, he wasn't exactly excited to go to the museum, but he still went. Naruto chuckled as he gestured to the next customer. Annabeth could stop talking about it for the whole week. "Well, I'm glad Percy and Annabeth are friends. I hope someday her good habits will rub off on him." The blonde merely smiled and nodded at his customer. "Good morning and welcome to Sweet on America." In one morning, he woke from a nightmare, cooked a killer breakfast, dropped his daughters off at school on time, killed a strange slutty monster and managed to get to his store in time. It was just the usual day for Namikaze Naruto, just as he would expect as a father of two beautiful little demigod princesses. Chapter 2, New Teacher. "Pass the black paintbrush, Annie." Annabeth nodded and happily handed her dad the small brush before she excitedly knelt down next to him, her eyes gleaming with joy. She was starting at the new Empire State Building model she had bought on her field trip, and it was starting to come to form. It would go perfectly with the model of the Statue of Liberty and the Capitol building she had in her room. Naruto smiled and slightly shook his head at his daughter's antics. Ever since she could read, Annabeth had been obsessed with architecture and iconic buildings. He wasn't surprised at all when she spent almost all her allowance on the Empire State Building model. Lacey had chirped that she would have spent the money on chocolates or dolls instead, but if seeing Annabeth skip and hop into the car with the model box in her hands meant anything, Naruto knew she felt satisfied with her purchase. "I think this part is beige." The eldest Namikaze's daughter nodded with a smile and opened the beige paint. "Yep, it's the most prominent color." For the past 4 hours, the father and daughter had been working to assemble the model and now could finally paint it. Annabeth didn't trust herself to paint the small delicate details, so Naruto was tasked with the job. After working with so many small and fragile candies, he was quite well suited for the task. "Be careful, Dad," mumbled Annabeth softly as she leaned in closer to see if her dad was doing it right. Naruto furrowed his brows in concentration and nodded back. "I know, I'm almost there." Lacey sat on the sofa behind her daddy and big sister watching How to Train Your Dragon on TV, happily munching on the candy her daddy brought home for the week. Normally he wouldn't allow her to eat so much in one night, but he was so focused with building the model he didn't notice. Lacey just silently grinned and enjoyed her wide selection of candy. It was a very good day for Lacey. Not only could she enjoy all her candy, her teacher was absent from school the whole morning and their whole class got a free day for fun. Best day ever. Looking down at the box of candies and chocolates, Lacey wondered which she should try next. "Try the Calisson, Lacey, it's really good." Lacey looked around when she heard a strange voice speak to her. It sounded to be a woman and was very melodic and sweet. Confused, Lacey looked down at the box of candies and found one that had a label that looked like it spelled Calisson. She couldn't really read well at her age, unlike her sister, and popped it in her mouth. "That's my cute girl. It's really good, isn't it?" Lacey couldn't help but nod with a big grin. "It's really good. The carambar is good too, though is very chewy." Lacey happily listened to the strange voice and unwrapped the traditional French candy. "Cream bar," she whispered to herself before she threw it in her mouth. It really was chewy, but it tasted great and she grinned at the taste, swaying from side to side in joy. "It's carambar, baby." "Oh, you are so cute, Lacey," said Naruto with a stern tone as he turned to see all the candy wrappers on the couch. "What did I say about eating so much candy in one night?" Lacey looked like a deer caught by headlights and just stared at her daddy with a cute and sheepish smile, hoping to not get in trouble. And what did I tell you to do with all the wrappers? You told me to not eat so much in one night and to throw the wrappers in the trash, mumbled Lacey softly. That's right, so give me the box and throw out the wrappers. Lacey pouted and handed the box over and started to gather all the wrappers. Naruto smiled and kissed the top of her head. That's my good girl. Lacey smiled back and ran over to the trash can to dump all the wrappers inside, but she heard the voice again. Ah, my sweet and handsome Naruto, he's such a cute and loving father. Oh, I miss him so much, but suddenly, the phone rang and Lacey raced to answer it. Hello. She cried with a happy grin. Naruto rolled his eyes playfully at his princess and took the phone away. Sorry about that, this is the Namikaze residence. Hello Mr. Namikaze, this is Principal Hawkwood. Naruto smiled and nodded to himself. Ah yes, how are you doing Mr. Hawkwood? Not too well I'm afraid, for some reason Ms. Turner did not turn up to class today and we still cannot find her anywhere, so Lacey's class will be taught by a substitute until we find Ms. Turner. Naruto winced a little at the subject and just nodded to himself. I just wanted to call all parents and assure you that this is an isolated incident and the substitute teacher will be just as good as Ms. Turner. Well, I have no problem with it, but I do thank you for taking the time to call us. Of course, Mr. Namikaze, have a good night. Good night to you as well, Mr. Hawkwood. Naruto sighed as he placed the phone down, his mood souring with worry. Anyone would be better than having a monster as a teacher, but I seriously hope that this was an isolated incident. Who was that, Daddy? Naruto sat down on the sofa and lifted Lacey onto his lap. That was the principal of your school, he said, attracting Annabeth's attention. He said Miss Turner is missing and they can't find her, so you will have a substitute teacher for the next few days. Lacey shrugged and nodded, okay, but is Miss Turner going to be back soon? I don't know, Princess. Annabeth hopped onto the sofa and hugged her knees to her chest, looking cozy. It's a little weird that your teacher would just disappear like that. She had a thoughtful expression on her face that looked exactly like Athena would when the goddess tried to deduce a situation, and it made Naruto feel a little nervous. Maybe she is sick and went to the hospital or something. Lacey pouted and looked sad. I hope not, I really like Ms. Turner. Well, Ms. Turner only likes demigods as food. The older sister shrugged, maybe the substitute will be even better. Naruto forced a smile and kissed Lacey's hair. Annie is right, Princess, maybe you'll really like your new teacher. I hope so. Annabeth tugged her dad's arm and pointed at her model. Come on Dad, we have to finish painting. Naruto just chuckled and nodded. Okay. Olympus, main hearth. Near the center of the floating paradise of Olympus was the main hearth, the origin of fire of the gods. The tongues of the vibrant red flames licked the bottom of the sky as the gods dined and chatted around it almost every day. It was the one place where harmony will always be kept. It was the place for familial bonding, family dinners, reunions and even weddings. The goddess of the hearth, Lady Hestia would almost always be seen tending its flames, and many of the Olympians would sit along the warm glow and chat with the sweet and friendly goddess. Hestia, whined a pouting Aphrodite as she sat on one of the many silver kneeling mats around the hearth. What should I do? The goddess of the hearth, with her curly black hair tucked into a simple brown scarf wrapped around her head, looked over at the most beautiful woman in the heavens with her warm and comforting red eyes. She had a slightly sheepish smile on her pretty face and lightly shrugged, I'm sorry, but I honestly don't know. Another goddess sitting on the other side of Hestia sighed in exasperation. Don't come bother Aunt Hestia with all your weird problems, Aphrodite. The goddess lightly glared over at the goddess of love with her silvery eyes as she warmed her hands near the hearth. Unlike you, we don't have the time for dealing with mortal men. Have some sympathy, Artemis. Aphrodite pouted as she rested head on her hands. This is really bothering me. A beautiful blonde goddess sat across from the other three and rubbed her temples. What are you droning on about again? Artemis sighed and decided to answer, well, Aunt Demeter. Aphrodite apparently really misses this mortal she had a relationship with a few years ago and wants to go visit him, but she can't come up with a good enough explanation that will make him understand why she left him all alone with their daughter. Demeter sighed again. Which mortal are you talking about? I can't even keep track of all your men. His name is Naruto Namikaze, muttered Aphrodite as she poked the flames with a small stick. He owns a cute little candy store in New York and is just the sweetest and cutest father, ever. She said, finishing on a high note. The name of the man seemed to attract the attention of the final goddess of the group, who sat next to Demeter looking a little bored. Her beautiful face suddenly took on a calculative expression as she narrowed her intimidating gray eyes at Aphrodite. "Oh!" exclaimed Demeter with a look of enlightenment. "Isn't that the mortal who Athena had a child with first and then you came along and seduced him?" Aphrodite smiled and nodded. "Yep, that's him. I still can't believe Naruto actually had a child with you." Athena stared into the hearth and ignored the looks the other goddesses gave her. He was a talented and intelligent man with a great mind for warfare, not just some pretty man who you can play around with. "I did not play around with him, we had a loving and happy relationship." The love goddess gave Athena a peeved look and just huffed. "Just because you decided to have a brainchild with Naruto doesn't mean he doesn't like sex." Artemis looked increasingly annoyed as Hestia felt a little out of place. "You should have seen how he was in bed, Athena, you really missed out on something good." "Enough." Athena glared at Aphrodite, making the latter flinch. Artemis shook her head and sighed, "Can the two of you not argue over some boy?" "He is not just some boy," cried Aphrodite as Athena carelessly nodded along. "You may think that all men are evil creatures that only hurt and demean women, but Naruto is not like that at all." She turned back to the flames and started poking it again. "You should see how sweet and loving he is to my cute little Lacey." "Okay then, let us see." Athena looked over at Demeter. "I beg your pardon, Aunt Demeter." Demeter pointed to the hearth as she looked at Aphrodite. "Just show us how sweet and caring you think he is." "Okay." Aphrodite turned to Hestia and grinned. "Sorry Hestia, but I'll just borrow your hearth for a few minutes." With a wave of her hands, the flames of the hearth flickered before forming into the live image of the scene inside Naruto Namake's home, a little bit to the right. Annabeth sat on her bed as her dad placed the finished Empire State Building model on the shelf she kept all her model, right next to the Statue of Liberty. "There. That's perfect." She grinned happily and clapped her hands together, marveling at how perfect her shelf now was. "Thanks, Dad." Naruto smiled with a sigh, standing back up and rubbing the small of his back. "You're welcome, sweetie." He sat down on the bed next to his little princess and stared at the shelf. "Is it complete now, or do you need some more models?" "Oh, I still need the Parthenon in Nashville." The dad smiled at his daughter and ruffled her hair. "The Parthenon, huh?" Annabeth grinned and nodded. "Yep, it's an exact replica of the original Parthenon in Greece." Naruto smiled and nodded along. "They had it in the museum today too, but I only had enough money today to buy one, so I got this one." "Well, if you get 3 A's on this semester's report card, I'll go and buy you the model." Annabeth's eyes widened and gleamed, making Naruto chuckle. "And you know what, if you get straight A's, that means 6 A's, I'll bring you to the Nashville Parthenon in person." Annabeth as stunned. "Oh really?" Naruto simply nodded. "Really? Wow, thank you, Dad." Annabeth lunged at her dad and wrapped her arms around his neck, making him laugh and hug her back. "I'm going to study really hard and make sure we're going to go Nashville." The dad held his daughter closer as he placed her back down on the bed, slightly brushing her hair to the side before kissing her forehead. "You are so much like your mother, it amazes me." Annabeth's eyes widened a little. She had never really heard her dad mention her mother before. "You both have the same love for architecture and the same expression on your face when you're happy." "Really?" whispered Annabeth. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, you have your mother's eyes. And every time you're really happy or excited, you get that little twinkle in your eyes and your lips would just slowly twitch up." The dad chuckled and wrapped one arm around Annabeth's shoulders. "And of course, when you're mad, both of you scare me to death," he finished with another chuckle. As young as she was, Annabeth could hear the pride and the hint of sadness in her dad's voice. She turned to give her dad a kiss on his cheek and hugged him tightly around his neck. Naruto was a little surprised at the sudden hug, but gladly hugged his little girl back, feeling the love and warmth she gave him. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Princess." After almost a full minute, Naruto pulled away and kissed Annabeth on her forehead. "Okay, it's time to go to bed, sweetie." His daughter smiled and nodded as he lifted the covers and tucked her in, kissing her again on the forehead. "And I mean sleep, not reading any books under the covers." Annabeth rolled her eyes and smiled. "I know, Dad." Naruto nodded and smiled again. "Good night, Annie." "Good night." Olympus, main hearth. Hestia smiled at the scene she just witnessed in the fire and couldn't help but feel a surge of warmth inside her heart. Aphrodite was right, this Naruto was quite the sweet and loving father, astronomically more than she could say about her own father. Annabeth looked very happy and loved in the scene, which were usually rare expressions to see on a demigod's face. See? Tell me that wasn't adorable, even though it wasn't with my Lacey. Athena nodded with a happy smile on her face. He is really sweet and loving. I can't believe he still remembers all those small details about me. He is a good father, said Artemis with an approving nod. I have seen many terrible fathers while gathering my hunters, and it's refreshing and a relief to see that such fathers really do exist. I agree, said Demeter, but she then turned to Athena, though he still thinks of you a lot, Athena. The wisdom goddess closed her eyes and sighed, but the slightest hint of red made its way to her cheeks. He still remembers how you smile and how you look when you're angry. Demeter smiled and nudged her niece. Maybe you should visit him sometime. He sounds like he still loves you. He is a good man and a good father. That was all Athena said, looking regal and composed. Aphrodite huffed and crossed her arms. Just keep watching, I bet he remembers me a lot more. She gave Athena a slight glare. After all, I made sure to give him a very nice parting gift our last night together. Athena glared back, but Artemis just sighed. Just keep watching. After closing the door to Annabeth's room, Naruto heard some ruffling around in the room just across from it. With a smile on his face, he knocked a few times on the door before opening it. Very much unlike her older sister's room, Lacey's room was more messy and unorganized. There were dolls and stuffed animals all over the place, and almost everything was pink. Every time Naruto would step into the room he couldn't but wonder if Aphrodite had been tinkering with the room. Lacey, it's time to go to bed. The little girl was sitting on her bed with her Barbie doll with a comb in her hand. I'm not sleepy yet, Daddy, she whined with a small pout, which would usually convince her daddy to let her stay up longer. Can I just play with Lucy a little bit longer? Naruto sighed at the name Lacey gave to her doll and sat down on the bed. No, you have school tomorrow and need to wake up early. He poked Lacey lightly on her forehead before kissing her hair. You need to get your rest and be on your best behavior when you meet your new teacher. Lacey pouted again. It's just a substitute teacher. With a knowing smile, Naruto shrugged. I don't know, whoever it is, they may turn out to be your new permanent teacher. But what about Ms. Turner? She asked. Naruto shrugged again. I don't know, but there is a chance. The blonde man stared at his youngest daughter with a loving smile, marveling at how adorable she looked. Unlike Annabeth and Athena, Lacey didn't look like Aphrodite. In Naruto's memory, Lacey's mother had long red hair and warm violet eyes, and their daughter had clearly inherited his traits, his blonde hair and blue eyes. But her attitude was certainly similar to her mother. She had the same love for sweets and had a bubbly personality that would light up the room. Daddy whined Lacey as she climbed under her blanket with a pout. I'm not sleepy at all. That's because you had so much sugar after dinner, you're too hyper to sleep. Naruto brushed his daughter's hair out of her face and smiled down at her. If you keep eating so much candy I won't bring home so many boxes anymore. No! Cried Lacey, horrified at the prospect of no candy. I promise I won't eat so much, but you still have to bring home the same big box. The dad chuckled and sighed. Fine, but you promised. He extended his pinky and wiggled it. Pinky swear it. Lacey giggled and wrapped her pinky around her father's. Okay. With a fond smile, Naruto leaned down and kissed Lacey's forehead. Good. Now be a good girl and go to sleep. But I can't sleep. Naruto sighed, but Lacey looked up at him with a smile. Can you sing me the Hush lullaby? Lacey, you're almost 6 years old. Lacey pouted and clapped her hands together. Please, you used to sing it to me all the time. Fine. Naruto patted Lacey's head and placed her arms back under her blanket and tucked her in, and she quickly turned to her side, looking at her daddy in joy. He turned around and turned off her lamp before he started to rhythmically pat her on the shoulder. Hush little baby, don't say a word. Daddy's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Daddy's gonna buy you a diamond ring. And if that diamond ring turns brass, Daddy's gonna buy you a looking glass. And if that looking glass gets broke, Daddy's gonna buy you a billy goat. And if that billy goat won't pull, Daddy's gonna buy you a cart and bull. And if that cart and bull turn over, Daddy's gonna buy you a dog named Rover. And if that dog named Rover won't bark, Daddy's gonna buy you a horse and cart. And if that horse and cart fall down, you'll still be the sweetest little baby in town. So hush baby, don't say a word. Mommy loves you and so do I. Finishing on a soft note, Naruto smiled and stopped his rhythmical patting. Lacey was actually asleep and had a tiny sweet smile on her face as she snuggled into her pillow. Naruto couldn't help but give a small chuckle at his little princess. It had been so long since he had sung her that lullaby and it still worked. Thinking back to a few years ago, Hush Little Baby was Lacey's favorite song, and it would put her to sleep every time. Unlike Annabeth, who never liked any lullabies, he could still remember how Annabeth cried when he sang Itsy Bitsy Spider for her. Slowly standing up from the bed, Naruto leaned down and kissed Lacey on the cheek. "I love you, my little princess." Olympus, main hearth. Hestia smiled again at the image in the flames. It had been a long time since she had seen such a heartwarming scene. As the goddess of family, she couldn't help but feel happy at seeing such strong bonds between father and daughters. It was impressive that even without a woman in his life he still did such a great job in raising his girls. Hestia couldn't name one male god who could have done what Naruto did. Aphrodite had tears in her eyes as she hugged Hestia close. "Oh Hestia, I have to go see him." Artemis sighed and rubbed her temples. "Aphrodite, Aunt Hestia is not a pillow you can hug because you're sad." "It's okay," replied Hestia before she lightly patted Aphrodite's shoulder. "And you shouldn't be sad, Aphrodite, you should be glad that your daughter has such a good father." "But I miss Naruto." Demeter smiled as he turned to face her fellow goddesses. "I must admit that it was a very cute scene. If we watch again when the girls wake up in the morning and we see him feeding them cereal, I will admit that he is the sweetest mortal man I have ever seen." Aphrodite just ignored Demeter and dried her tears. "And the girls need a mother in their lives, every girl does." The goddess of love conjured up a mirror in her hand and started to fix her makeup. "I mean, I can sense and measure the love Naruto has for the girls and it's very, very strong, but nonetheless the girls still need a mother. If only that stupid ancient law would disappear, I could go down and at least spend a few days with them." Artemis sighed again. She had a feeling that Aphrodite might actually want to show her daughter some love, but would actually want to spend another romantic night with this Naruto Namikaze even more. Hestia bit her lips and nodded. "I guess you're right, a family is really not complete without a mother. It's okay, I'll send them some of the best cereal in the world." Demeter smiled and nodded to herself. "I promise that your girls will grow very well with the help of my cereal." All the while, Athena was silent. She sat beside her aunt with her gray eyes staring into the hearth, her mind running a million miles an hour in thought. Despite how much she hated Aphrodite's usually irrational behavior, but she couldn't help but agree. Athena clearly saw the love Naruto had for both his daughters and was very glad. He was one of the few fathers of her children that didn't feel overwhelmed or burdened when she dropped of their child to him. She would always remember how happy Naruto looked when he first held their daughter in his arms. But Aphrodite and Hestia were correct. Both Annabeth and Lacey needed a mother, and as much as it annoyed her to say it, Naruto needed a woman in his life. She had always felt a little guilty about leaving Naruto by himself to raise their daughter, and having a woman in his life would make him and his daughters happy, then she would give them her blessing. Aphrodite sighed and made her mirror vanish. Naruto should have a woman in his life. Hestia patted Aphrodite's back and smiled. "It's okay, I'll be sure to watch over yours and Athena's daughter." Athena looked up at her aunt with surprise. "I'm not an Olympian, so I have much more free time on my hands. I'll go check on the girls and make sure they're well." Athena smiled and nodded. "Thank you, Aunt Hestia, that would be great." Aphrodite also nodded. "You are the cool aunt to most of our immortal children already, so I'm sure the girls will love you. Tia, come back to my place after this," said Demeter to her older sister. "I'll give you some top-of-the-line cereal and oatmeal to bring to the mortal world." Hestia just smiled at her sister. "Sure, sister. Can we go for ramen again tonight, Daddy?" Naruto sighed as he walked towards Good Elementary, holding on to his daughter's hands as they headed towards the kindergarten building. "Not 2 nights in a row, maybe we'll go again this weekend." Annabeth held open one of her many books with her free hand as she looked around. "Hey Dad, I have to go meet Percy soon. He said he doesn't get some of the homework we got yesterday and needs my help before class." With a chuckle and slight worry, Naruto reluctantly nodded. "Sure, go look for Percy." He leaned down and kissed Annabeth's princess curls and hugged her slightly. "Be sure to be here at 3 o'clock sharp." Annabeth rolled her eyes with a smile. "I know, Dad." She playfully slapped Lacey's shoulder with a smile. "Bye, Lace." Bye, Annie." Continuing his way to the kindergarten building, Naruto lifted Lacey into his arms. He was still a little worried about another monster posing as someone in the school and wanted to hold his little girl close. But when they arrived at the usual building, there was a large group of students along with their parents standing outside the building. Naruto heard some of the mothers talking about the new teacher and saying she looked sweet and beautiful. Naruto looked over at the door of the building and there was a new lady shaking the hands of the parents. He had to admit that she was really beautiful, not like Ms. Turner, who was alluring and sexy. The new lady was pretty in a sweet and loving way, and even from so far away he could see the incredible warmth in her eyes. She had long black curly hair and was wearing a simple white blouse with beige dress pants. As the parents dropped of their children and left, the lady eventually came to shake Naruto's hand. "Hello there." Naruto smiled and gladly shook her hand. "Hello, I'm Naruto Namikaze and this is my daughter, Lacey Namikaze." The lady smiled and gently touched Lacey's cheek. "You're really cute, Lacey." Lacey giggled happily, making the lady smile wider before turning back to Naruto. "It's very nice to meet you, Mr. Namikaze. I'm Ms. Hess, Tia Hess." She smiled, making Naruto feel warm and comfortable. "I'm the new kindergarten teacher. We're going to have a very fun year together, Lacey." Chapter 3, Prayer. Naruto had always loved picking his daughters up from school. They always looked so happy when they see their family car drive into the parking lot. Annabeth had stopped being overly enthusiastic since she started to mature past her age, but Lacey was still the same. Every day, when he would step out of the car and greet them, Lacey would run over to him as fast as she could and jumped into his arms. She could cry out "Daddy" and immediately fire question after question, like, "Can we go get ramen for dinner? Can we stop by the toy store? Did you bring home any candy, Daddy?" But it seemed that Lacey had stopped that habit overnight. Naruto stepped out of his car and only saw Annabeth sitting by their usual bench reading a book. She looked up and saw her dad and a smile immediately appeared on her face. She closed her book and walked up to him, grabbing onto his hand. "Hey Annie," said Naruto with a smile before he ruffled her princess curls. "Where's your sister?" "She's over there, chatting with her new teacher." Annabeth pointed over to the kindergarten building and Naruto was a little surprised to see a crowd of kids surrounding the front entrance. Curious and a little worried, he led Annabeth over by the hand. From where they stood, Naruto saw a few parents off to the side of the crowd, smiling as they observed what was happening. Then the blonde realized that one of the parents was Sally Jackson, who had a morning shift with him just this morning. She was holding on to her son, Percy's, hand as she smiled at the scene. Now he was really curious. Annabeth was curious as well, so she followed her dad's pace, holding on to his hand all the while. She had wondered if she was a little too old to hold her dad's hand, but then she saw Percy holding onto his mother's hand, so it should be okay for her. "Hey Sally," greeted Naruto with a smile. Sally looked over at saw her boss and smiled back at him. "Hey Naruto, you're here too, huh?" "Yep," with a curt nod, Naruto turned to the Percy. "Wow, you've been growing, Percy. You're going to be taller than me soon." The blonde smiled and ruffled Percy's hair, making the boy smile a little. "It must be all the blue candy, they have all the nutrients." Annabeth rolled her eyes. "I never understood the blue candy." Sally chuckled and nodded, "It's an inside joke." "Yeah, wise girl, the blue candy is good for me." Percy was a little peeved that Annabeth kept telling him that his teeth were going to rot if he kept munching on blue M&Ms during class. "Not rotting teeth for me. Keep thinking that and you'll end up with no teeth, seaweed brain." Naruto chuckled and wondered out loud, "Seaweed brain?" Percy crossed his arms and huffed. "I was eating a lot of dried seaweed on day and she started calling me that." Sally giggled at the aptly placed nickname. "Well, I think it's really cute." Naruto just chuckled at the pair of childhood friends and turned to look at the group of kids surrounding the kindergarten entrance. At first he didn't notice anything, but then he saw that the new teacher, Ms. Hess, was handing out trays of cookies. She looked as beautiful as ever. Her long wavy black hair swayed from side to side as she hugged each child that eagerly took some cookies from her, her eyes dancing with joy at the smiles and grins on her students' faces. It almost made Naruto blush. She was breathtakingly stunning in a sweet and genuine kind of way. He had never seen such a thing before. Sally smiled at the sight as well. Miss Hess baked a bunch of cookies for the students this morning and it was so good they wanted her to bake another tray. She was really nice and actually made a lot more for them to take home. Naruto smiled when it was Lacey's turn to receive her cookies and grinned when his princess hugged her teacher around her waist. "Thank you, Ms. Hess." He heard his princess chirp. "You're the best." "You're welcome, sweetie." Hestia loved her little niece. She was adorable and was very talkative in class, just like how her mother would during the Olympian meetings. The goddess of the hearth could clearly see Aphrodite in little Lacey, not so much the promiscuity and general sultriness, but a lot in her bubbly personality, sweet demeanor and of course, her stunning beauty. Even now, Hestia could tell that Lacey would grow into a stunning beauty, much like all her other demigod siblings on her mother's side. "Daddy!" She heard little Lacey yell. Hestia smiled happily when she saw Lacey run to hug her father, who was actually looking at them from the side of the school. It was wonderful to see such familial love from the mortals who had bonded with the gods. Most other companions of the gods had suffered tragic fates, even in such modern times. The women of Zeus, Hades and Poseidon were clear indications. It was a relief that someone who had children with both Athena and Aphrodite could still be so happy. In the eons that she had known Aphrodite, never had she seen her pine after a mortal man so much. Even with Adonis, all those years ago, she would forget about him and move on to either a new man or back to Ares, but this Naruto person was different. The affection Aphrodite showed to him when they all looked at them through the hearth was much more serious and loving than with her other lovers, perhaps even more so than Ares. Hestia wondered what was so special about this man that he made the goddess of love fall for him so real and hard. "Hello again, Ms. Hess." Naruto stepped up to the new teacher as the other parents slowly dispersed after their children were done with their cookies. "Thank you for giving the children the cookies." "No problem at all," Hestia replied with a smile, her eyes warming everyone's soul. "I had a lot of time today and all the kids were very well behaved and deserved a treat." Hestia giggled and patted Lacey's cheek as she sat comfortably in her dad's arms. "And Lacey here is already one of my favorite students." "You're my favorite too, Ms. Hess." Hestia then noticed Sally and smiled at her. "Hello there." "Hi," replied Sally as she extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Hess. My son isn't in your class, but I've already heard good things about it." "Well, I am going to be teaching some of the older classes as well, so I might have him in my class later." Hestia wanted to have both her great-nieces in her class, so she used the mist and manipulated the principal to assign her Annabeth's class as well. Sally smiled and gestured to the boy holding onto her hand. "Percy, say hello." The boy smiled up at the nice lady and waved, "Hello, Miss Hess." Hestia froze a little at the sight of the distinct green eyes that were staring up at her, but quickly composed herself. "Hello there Percy, how are you?" "I'm good, thanks." Naruto smiled and stepped forward also. "In that case, Ms. Hess, this is my eldest daughter, Annabeth." The blonde girl needed to push from her dad and gladly walked up to the new teacher with her hand extended. "Hello Ms. Hess, it's nice to meet you." Hestia giggled and shook the girl's hand, clearly seeing Athena in her. "I really do hope you teach our class." "Well, we don't want to keep you here all day." Naruto smiled and shook the teacher's hand again. "It's very nice to meet you, Ms. Hess, we'll see you again tomorrow." "Yes, have a good day, Mr. Namikaze, Sally." Hestia smiled and winked at the children, "and I hope to see you all in class." "Bye, bye," cried out Lacey with a large grin. "Bye, bye Ms. Hess." "Goodbye." As the group walked on into the distance, Hestia sighed and closed her eyes. The entire situation had changed entirely. Not only were Athena and Aphrodite's daughters attending her school, but her younger brother, Poseidon's son was also present. Why I am even surprised. Located on Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, New York, overlooking the vast Central Park, were series of high-end apartment buildings. The tallest one was right at the center. It was decorated with various Greek white statues along its outer walls and had beams of light casting colorful shades on its various pillars. And at the very top, the penthouse, lived one of the most important beings in all of existence. Without her, none of the current Olympians would even exist and mankind would likely be as it were in the Stone Age. "Mom, I'm home." Mother Rhea, the mother of the older Olympians and retired queen of the universe. Known as the Titan of beauty and motherhood, Rhea was stunningly beautiful with warm and loving eyes. She was all three of her daughters put together, with only their positive factors. She was as sweet and loving as Hestia, as passionate as Demeter and was as beautiful as Hera. And above all, she was her children's most precious and important person. From Hades to Zeus, all of them loved their mother unconditionally. Rhea, with her luscious blonde hair styled into an intricate braid, dressed in an elegant white dress that displayed her stunning beauty and womanly figure, stepped out to greet her favorite daughter with a smile. "How was your first day at work, dear?" Hestia rolled her eyes playfully at her mother's teasing and quickly wrapped her arms around hers. "It was quite fun, all the kids are adorable and well behaved, especially little Lacey." The godly mother and daughter stepped into their living room. "I met Annabeth as well, and as you would expect, she's like a little Athena." Rhea smiled. "I still find it funny that those two found love in the same mortal. Mr. Namikaze is quite handsome, so he's bound to attract Aphrodite. Athena had told us that he's also very smart when it comes to warfare, though I have no idea how he would have such knowledge. If he is such a good man, perhaps you would feel something for him." Hestia rolled her eyes again and smiled at her mom. "Very funny, Mom." The mother and daughter sat down on their couches with Clash of the Titans playing on the TV. To Rhea, that movie was almost a comedy. Saying her eldest son used a part of his flesh to create a creature known as the Kraken certainly was an interesting concept and utterly hilarious. And if there was one thing Rhea thought should stop, it would be to stop giving past heroes bigger egos. Perseus only slayed Medusa and certainly did not kill an apocalyptic monster. That was reserved for someone else. "Well, there is some bad news." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Hestia sighed and leaned back fully on the couch. "I met a student today, a friend of Annabeth, I think, and he has very peculiar green eyes." Rhea sighed. She already knew what was coming next. "The same shade as Poseidon's. His name is Percy. Your brothers are always like this. He broke his oath and now there's a half-blood who can fulfill the prophecy." Hestia rubbed her temples and pursed her lips. "If Hades finds out, then young Percy may end up like young Talia." Rhea sighed once more before she stood up and grabbed her daughter's hand. "Well, no sense mulling over it by ourselves. I made us dinner." Not only did Hestia inherit her warm and sweet personality from her mother, she also inherited her skills in cooking. Both their food would have the same homemade taste that all children and most adults would love. All Hestia's nieces and nephews loved her food, especially Artemis and Persephone. The last time Hestia made her famous shepherd's pie, the two young goddesses polished off at least 10 servings. "I made your favorite today, Tia." Hestia smiled at the sight of sweet potato mash, fresh Greek salad and crispy calamari. "Thanks Mom, you're the best. I know how to take care of my little girl." Rhea chuckled as she poured 2 glasses of wine. "Even though you're all tens of thousands of years old, you'll always be my little babies." She sat down next to Hestia at their 16-seat dinner table of white marble, and snapped her fingers. "And I also know how to punish my babies." A pale blue glow emanated from her fingers and soon formed into a trident. Hestia filled her plate before she looked over at her mother. "You're calling him now?" "Yep," she replied with a smirk. In under 10 seconds, a rush of water suddenly appeared in the middle of the dining room and it collected into a humanoid figure. Soon, Poseidon, Earthshaker, king of Atlantis and god of the seas, wearing his usual Birkenstocks, khaki shorts and an brightly colored Hawaiian shirt, smiled at his mother and quickly stepped forward. "Hey Mom, how are Wyatvich?" The god of the seas jumped back at the sight of the calamari. "You cooked my people." Hestia giggled in her seat and decided to not eat her calamari while her brother was here. "Sit down, little brother." "I think I'll stand," replied Poseidon with a sheepish grin. He didn't want to be near his deep-fried people. "Sit down." "Yes, mother." Rhea dipped her calamari in some tzatziki sauce and popped it in her mouth, making her son wince. She stared into his green eyes, watching in silent amusement as he started to sweat. He may be not as scared of her as Zeus, but Rhea still prided herself in her influence over him. "Why did you call me here, mother?" Rhea smiled. "Your sister met an interesting young boy today," she said as she continued to enjoy her calamari. "His name is Percy." Poseidon winced again. "Would you happen to know him?" Poseidon tried to think of a quick lie, but one look from his mother made him flinch. So before long, he just sighed. "I'm sorry, mother, I didn't mean to." Hestia stood and grabbed her plate. "Enjoy your dinner, Mom, and good luck, little brother." "And no, Hestia, don't leave." At least with Hestia around, Rhea wouldn't be as scary. Hestia giggled and waved before she vanished in a burst of flames, teleporting back to her room. Poseidon bit his lips as he turned back to his mother, sweating profusely at the stare she gave him. It made his wife's glare look tame and cute. Honestly, he would rather fight Hera and Demeter together than face his mother. Rhea smiled as she pushed the plate of calamari towards her second eldest son. "Go on, dear, I made you dinner. Mmuth, eat." Poseidon closed his eyes and slowly reached for the calamari, all the while wondering what kind of punishment did Zeus get for siring Talia and Jason. In the sea god's mind, he hoped Rhea made Zeus eat an eagle. "I love steak," exclaimed Lacey as she cut into her New York strip and chomped on a large piece, and mashed potato. Annabeth giggled at her little sister and nodded along. "They're really good, but I'm waiting for the ice cream and sticky pudding." Lacey's eyes twinkled, like any daughter of Aphrodite would when she heard the words ice cream, and lit up like a Christmas tree. Dad also bought some sweetened popcorn for later. "I love you, Daddy." Naruto, who had already finished his steak, chuckled as he knelt next to the stack of DVDs they had beside the TV. "I love you too, Princess." The father was looking through their selection of movies. He bought a new stack of Disney and Pixar movies a few weeks ago, and they never got around to watching most of them. But when the girls weren't looking, Naruto quickly threw away some of them, every one that were about mother-daughter bonds. He didn't want his girls to feel awkward or sad. He also hid some of the more romantic ones. He didn't want his princesses to start dating too soon. Any date before turning 18 was out of the question. Any boy who would challenge his rule would end up like Ms. Turner. "Can we watch How to Train Your Dragon again?" Annabeth rolled her eyes. "Come on, we've seen that so many times." "So what? It's a good movie." Lacey pointed at her sister and glared. "You've made us watch Night in the Museum 100 times anyway." "Girls," said Naruto sternly, giving both his girls a look. "No fighting." Annabeth crossed her arms. "How about we watch 101 Dalmatians?" "Fine," Lacey muttered. Naruto smiled. "That's my good girls." The blonde stretched his back and walked back into the kitchen. "Now both of you bring your finished plates to the counter and go find the DVD, I'll get the dessert ready and get the popcorn." Annabeth and Lacey smiled and quickly placed their plates beside the sink. "Okay, thanks Dad." Lacey hugged her dad's legs and smiled up at him. "You're the best, Daddy." Naruto chuckled and playfully rubbed Lacey's hair. "Yep, I'm the best. Olympus, Aphrodite Temple." "No!" cried the goddess of love angrily with her glare on full blast. "I will never do that." "What the hell is wrong with you, Athena?" Athena would rarely visit the temples of other gods and goddesses except for meeting with Hestia at the main hearth, and she would never really want to visit Aphrodite's temple, in other words, an oversized pink dollhouse with far too much perfume in the air. She had tried to convince herself to let it go, but just like the past 10,000 years, her rational side won. "Calm down, Aphrodite." Athena sighed and rubbed her temples. "Just hear me out." Aphrodite flared her power, which Athena thought was surprisingly powerful. "How can you of all people ask me to do something so stupid?" She walked up to the wisdom goddess and glared at her. "You were the one who fell for Naruto first and were angry at me for taking him, and you think he's a great father for Annabeth, with all that I actually thought you still had feelings for him." "I do, Aphrodite, but this is for his own good." Athena leveled her gray eyes at the other goddess, flaring her own power. "It is also for the benefit of the girls. You know they need a mother figure in her life." "No, I will not pair him with some mortal woman." "Why not?" asked Athena. "Surely you don't think you can actually go back down and be with him, do you?" Aphrodite recoiled, clearly not used to arguing with the smartest being on Olympus. "Even if you manage to explain everything to Naruto and he falls in love with you again, do you know what Ares and Hephaestus would do to him? Well, I'm sure they won. Be realistic, Aphrodite. We've already affected his life enough. We should just find a suitable woman for him and have him live a happy and normal life." Athena sighed at Aphrodite's crestfallen expression and the sadness in her eyes. "I know you love him, perhaps even more so than your other lovers, but this is the best we can offer him. But, we don't have a choice." Athena placed a comforting hand on the love goddess' shoulder and closed her eyes. "There are many good women around him we could pair him with." "Athena, Aphrodite." The two goddesses' eyes widened at the familiar voice of the man they were currently discussing. "And Naruto?" muttered Aphrodite. "What's this?" Athena smiled softly and crossed her arms. "He's praying to us." In the decade that Naruto had spent with his daughters, he had never really prayed to their mothers. They had each told him that if he wanted to speak with them, he could pray to them. He had wanted to pray many times, perhaps it was nervousness or fear, but he had never actually prayed. A long time had passed, but deep inside his heart, he knew that he still had feelings for them. Athena, the brilliant and confident woman who challenged and attracted him at an intellectual level, and Aphrodite, the most passionate, loving and beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. It was not hard to believe their statuses as goddesses, they were just that glorious and beautiful. But after many hours of thinking, he wanted to speak with them. He wanted to know if they knew how beautiful and wonderful their daughters had become. Athena, Aphrodite? He said as he knelt by the side of his bed, his finger laced together. He knew that it was the wrong religion, but it was the only posture he could think of for praying. He had thought of many things to say, but none were coming at the moment. He opened his mouth, but no sounds came out. He helplessly looked around before his eyes focused on a picture on his nightstand. It was a simple photo. It was him holding on to Annabeth's hand. It was a few years ago and her height only reached his waist, and Lacey sitting in his arms, still basically a toddler. With a soft smile, he found his words. Thank you. Unknown to him, the two goddesses heard him perfectly and were surprised at his words. Annabeth and Lacey are the greatest things that ever happened to me. He rose to his feet and grabbed the picture. Thank you for giving me my little princesses. He lay on his bed and held the picture above his face, smiling at how happy his daughter looked. They are perfect. Olympus, Aphrodite Temple. Oh, Naruto. Aphrodite smiled fondly at the voice of her lover as she sat down on her sofa in a daze. You're so sweet. Athena sat next to the love goddess and smiled along. He really loves the girls. I'm sorry I haven't prayed for so many years, I guess I was a little nervous about it. Naruto's voice rang true in the minds of Athena and Aphrodite. But I still remember both of you very well. Still as loud and playful as ever, chirped Aphrodite. Just to get things out of the way, Athena, I still read a lot, like you told me to do. I've read almost 100 books on Greek mythology. I guess it's not mythology, but yeah. Now I understand why you liked the owl cage so much when we went to the zoo and why you didn't like the Poseidon's Adventure movie. They chose the wrong name. But in my opinion, you clearly won that competition. Olive trees are way cooler than horses. You got that right. Athena smiled at how cheerful Naruto sounded. It reminded her so much of her days with the blonde. She missed those days sometimes and even more so at the moment. Aphrodite, I made sure to import all kinds of candy from France and they are very demanded at the store, but Lacey usually cleans them out. I am still using the same haircut you made me get all those years ago. It attracts a little too much attention from the single moms at my daughter's schools, but I guess that just proves that you were right. Of course I'm right, you're absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, I just wanted to check in and tell you both how great our little girls turned out. Oh, I'm sure you both will love your daughters so much. Annabeth already loves architecture and beats me at chess. I bet she'll give you a run for your money soon, Athena. The wisdom goddess smiled and nodded fondly. Lacey, on the other hand, acts a little too much like you, Aphrodite. She eats way too much candy and jumps and skips around when she has too much sugar. But no matter what, I will allow no boys to date her before she's 18. I have a shotgun ready to enforce that rule. Ah, that's no fun, Naruto. Anyway, I make sure they eat right, take a bath every day, brush their teeth morning and night and go to sleep on time. Both of them have good friends at school and they have good grades, especially Annabeth, who gets straight A's almost every term. Athena and Aphrodite smiled fondly, missing Naruto more and more with each passing word. Funny thing. We just watched 101 Dalmatians and now they want pets of their own. They don't want dogs, though. After that movie all they want are cats. I have no idea how watching a dog movie would make them want cats, but I can't understand everything. What do you two think? Should I get them some pets? Of course. Get Lacey a little kitten. Annabeth would love one as well. Oh, right. Lacey's teacher turned out to be a monster. What? Aphrodite cried as she flared her power. Athena was very worried as well. It wasn't so bad, I managed to kill it with some luck, but I hope these attacks won't get worse. Athena was shocked. Naruto actually managed to kill a monster. I can't find the weaknesses of monsters in the books I have, so if you can, please tell me an easy way of dealing with them. Anyway, I just wanted to catch up, wondering if you two ever think about me. Athena frowned and Aphrodite bit her lips as her heart stung. I promise I will speak with you two more from now on. He sighed and climbed under his covers. Good night. Lady Artemis must be busy now because the moon is very bright tonight. With a brief moment of silence, Naruto contemplated his words. Yeah, good night, Athena, Aphrodite. The two goddesses were silent as they looked at each other, both thinking pretty much the same thing. With so few words, Naruto had reminded them of the times they shared together, and it made them miss him more and more. Even Athena felt a little worse at the thought of matching him with another woman and almost decided to retract her request to Aphrodite. In the end, all she wanted was for Naruto to be happy, and he should have a woman in his life for that. I'm not going to pair him with a mortal woman, said Aphrodite softly and sternly. I will never do that. I will find a way to make him happy, but I'm not going to force him to love a random woman. She stood and started to walk away. There is nothing you can do that will change my mind. Athena sighed and started to walk away herself. I know. She teleported back to her own temple and thought, I also want Naruto to be happy. Chapter 4, Love of Family. Olympus, Temple of Hera. As the Queen of Olympus, Hera had the second largest temple on Olympus. Although she would usually stay in the temple of Zeus to be close to her husband, she would still return to her own place on occasion. Decorated with statues of peacocks and staffs of lotus flowers, the gargantuan structure marked her greatness and divinity. Its widespread hallways would be constantly used by the hundreds of handmaidens of the queen, all of them carrying trays of offerings and sacrifices of mortals to show the goddess. Then, located at the epicenter of the temple, was Hera's sacred bath, a pool of the most sacred water in the universe and the very definition of purity. Hera would take one sacred bath every year to celebrate her marriage to Zeus. It was perhaps the most sacred cradle of feminine grace in existence. Sorry, but no, said the Queen of Olympus without hesitation. With her pretty hands clasped together, Aphrodite pouted at the queen. Please, Hera. Her charm speak was on full blast, which would probably work very well on all the male gods, but not nearly as effective on the most powerful goddess. It's not June and you won't need it until next year, just let me use it this one time. The queen sighed as she continued to water her lotuses. The sacred bath is only for me and my marriage to Zeus. She looked back at the most beautiful goddess and gave her a stern look. I'm sure whatever escapade you plan to do with either of my sons is none of my business, but neither of them would care about you taking this bath. It's not Ares or Hephaestus. Aphrodite glared at the queen and flared some of her power. Neither of your stupid sons deserves something like this. Hera would have been angry, but after so many years of dealing with her disappointing sons, she was more curious than angry. She looked back at Aphrodite with one eyebrow raised. In the millennia she had known the bubbly goddess of love, she had never seen her act so angrily so quickly. She would usually just nag at someone until she got what she wanted, but never would she flare her power and glare. Needless to say the queen was interested. Then who is it? Aphrodite calmed and slowly approached Hera. I really need your help with this. Her hands gently held onto the queen's arm as she led them over to a long couch. I've never felt like this before. Hera sat down with the younger goddess and pursed her lips. I assume you're talking about some man you love. Aphrodite nodded and bit her lips. I am the embodiment of love and lust, and I have been in love thousands of times before, but I've never felt like this before. She placed her hands on her lap and looked down at them with a sigh. Even with Ares and Adonis, I've never felt so warm. Hera was genuinely surprised at what she was hearing and just remained silent. Out of all the fathers of my children, he is the best, ever. I could feel the love he has for my little Lacey and it's incredible. I can say that it rivals the love Lady Rhea has for all of you. Hera smiled. I'm happy that such fathers exist. Aphrodite smiled back. Most of the fathers of my children and the fathers of the other goddess children would feel burdened to some degree, but he didn't. When I dropped the baby off to him he just smiled at me and held on to the bundle like it was the most precious thing in the world. Hera smiled at the warm smile on her fellow goddess face, one she was not used to seeing. And when I watch him playing with his daughters I just get this warm feeling in my heart and it makes me want to go and be with him. Wow, Hera whispered with a soft smile. I think for the first time in your immortal life, you have felt the love of a family, the kind of love a wife would feel for her husband. The queen knew perfectly that her crippled son could never give Aphrodite such strong emotions, and neither could her disappointing warmonger of a son. This is a part of my domain, so it's no surprise that you've never felt it before. The love of a married couple with children is completely different from your usual love between two people. To be able to see the man you love adore and take care of the product of your relationship with him is the most precious form of love. Hera gave a soft chuckle and placed a soft hand on the younger goddess' face. This form of love is the one I have yearned for ever since I was a young goddess, and you are very lucky to have found it so easily. I can assure you that none of the gods on Olympus could give you something like this. Aphrodite was staring at Hera with widened eyes with her lips parted. Family. She had thought about it before, the day she married Hephaestus, but that had been a bitter disappointment. There was a moment she thought she had felt something akin to it the day Eros was born, but when Ares didn't even show himself during the birthing, she knew it wasn't it. It was surprising and slightly horrifying to realize that none of her previous lovers had been good fathers. This is something very precious, especially for us goddesses. Hera had seen many mortal couples with perfect little families and an amount of love that made her jealous. No immortals could act so lovingly when they know they could never die. That was the one thing the mortals had that the gods didn't. I don't see it very much in the mortal world and almost never for goddesses. I understand what you're saying, Aphrodite whispered as she slowly looked up at the queen. I see many husbands and wives trying to preserve this kind of love and fail at the end. This kind of love can be very short-lived, but is very strong. I can say that my marriage did not give me anything close to this and I've never really felt this kind of love. Until now, said Hera with a smile. That made Aphrodite's eyes widen again, but also made her smile. This is not lust or any physical attraction, continued Hera. This is the bond between a mother and a father, and the love between them is nurtured by their love for their child. This is the most basic and natural kind of love, but also one of the most rare, especially for us immortals. The queen chuckled and shook her head. Honestly, you are the last person I would expect to have a love like this. Well, I don't think I'm the only one, Aphrodite whispered as she looked away. Athena feels the same way, I could feel it. Wait a minute, said Hera with her hand rose. Is this mortal the one you and Athena both had a child with? The one Demeter told me about. The love goddess sighed and nodded. Yes, it is. Hera laughed a little and sighed with a smile. I guess you both desire the same kind of love, the love of family and the warm and secure feelings that come with it. You may have lots of experience with love and lust before, and Athena may firmly believe that the meeting of the mind is the purest form of love, but subconsciously, the notion of a functional and loving family is irresistible to both of you. The queen smiled happily. I would know, this is my domain. Aphrodite bit her lips and nodded. I believe you. Hera stood from her seat and returned to watering her lotuses. Feel free to use my bath. Aphrodite looked up at her in shock, clearly surprised. I can make this one exception. Hopefully after this, the goddess of love will be more lenient towards the love lives between of husbands and wives. The most beautiful goddess stood and smiled. Don't worry, I definitely will. When are we going to buy our costumes, Daddy? Cried Lacey with a large pout on her face, making Naruto smile. I want to buy the pink princess dress with the tiara. Annabeth rolled her eyes and shook her head. You go as a princess every single year, Lace. She held on to her dad's hand and tried to drag him so he'd walk faster. Why don't you just use the same one as last year? You haven't grown that much. Lacey stuck her tongue out at her sister as she continued to tug at her daddy's hand. Shut up, Annie. She glared at Annabeth, but she looked more cute than threatening. You pick all the ugly costumes, so what do you know? Shush, girls, said Naruto sternly. No fighting. It was mid-October and the ever-popular Halloween was approaching. Just like the last 2 years, from when Lacey was old enough to want to dress up, the youngest Namikaze's daughter would constantly beg her daddy to go buy her costume. She went as a princess every year and her dress would be pink every year, but she also wanted a new dress every year. Naruto didn't mind, Lacey was just acting like her mother. We'll all go buy our costumes this weekend. Yay! Cried Lacey as she hugged her daddy's waist. Thanks, Daddy. Naruto kissed Lacey's head before he unlocked their house door and walked in. They had just returned from buying some groceries and because they walked past the costume store Lacey had begun firing her questions. Halloween was Lacey's favorite time of the year, even more so than Christmas and the New Year's Eve. Candy and chocolates were almost better than Christmas trees and fireworks. What are you going as, Annabeth? Annabeth grinned at her dad. I want to go as Lady Liberty. Naruto chuckled and kissed her head. That's perfect for you. Hey! Exclaimed Lacey as she pointed at their living room. What's that? Naruto looked over and immediately grew suspicious. There was a cardboard box in the middle of their living room and it was closed. No one had a key to their house and he didn't order anything that would come in a box. He pushed his daughters behind his legs and walked to the box himself. wondering if he should just kick the box or something. But he was sure glad he didn't when he opened it. "Oh my gosh!" cried Lacey as loudly as she could when she saw the contents of the box. "It's so cute." The little girl gushed and nearly pushed her dad to the ground when she ran to the box and reached into it. She had shaky arms as she held a small kitten in her arms. Its fur was as white as snow and had solid black eyes that screamed innocent. It yawned in Lacey's arm and snuggled itself against her fluffy jacket, making her gush more and squeal. Annabeth also had stars in her eyes when she saw another gray kitty in the box. She wasn't as excited as her little sister, but she also gave a light squeal as she held the gray cutie in her arms. It had the same eyes as her sister's kitty, but it looked smarter and didn't laze around in her arms and was looking around with great curiosity. "Thank you, Daddy." Lacey practically jumped into her daddy's arms and snuggled into him, all the while crying out thank you and thank you. "I love you, Daddy, you're the best daddy in the whole world." Annabeth also hugged her dad and smiled up at him. "Thanks, Dad, I had wondered if you would buy us some pets, but I didn't know you'd buy them for us so soon. I thought you'd wait until Christmas." Naruto chuckled nervously and nodded. "It's okay, girls. You've both been really good and deserve it." He had wondered if someone had sneaked into his house, but when he saw the small owl symbol drawn onto the bottom of the box, he knew. Apparently, his prayer to the mothers of his children had been answered. "Thank you, Athena, Aphrodite." Then his cell phone rang in his pocket. "Hello," he said after he pulled away from his daughter's hugs, smiling at them as they ran off into their playing area with their kittens in their arms. "This is Naruto Namikaze." "Hello, Naruto." Naruto flinched at the voice. It reminded him of his lectures back at university and him getting in trouble with his favorite professor. But at the same time, he felt extremely happy at hearing her voice again. It had been a very long time and he had wondered if he would ever hear from her again. To be honest to himself, he had expected to not ever hear from her again. "Hey Athena." A soft chuckle came from the other side. "It's Ms. Olympia, Naruto." Naruto couldn't help but laugh at the nostalgia and nodded, "Yes, ma'am. And don't call me ma'am." Athena gave a melodic laugh before she continued. "So I assume the girls like their little pets." "Like isn't the word," he replied with a smile as he turned around to look at his daughters. "More like love or utterly adore." "That's good." Just from hearing the voice, Naruto could see the smile on the goddess' face. "Aphrodite and I both chose the kittens personally. I know Annabeth would like the color gray and Aphrodite insisted on the white for Lacey." Naruto felt emotional and rubbed his eyes. "So you watch over Annabeth?" "Of course I do, Naruto." Athena frowned and bit her lips. "She is my daughter, Naruto. I love her and no matter where she is, I will watch over her." "Thank you. I need you to do something now." Naruto focused again at her words and made her to pay attention. "Go to your bedroom, there is something for you as well." He wanted to ask more, but she spoke up again. "Talk to you again soon, Naruto." The call was ended and Naruto felt his words die in his mouth. But then he asked himself, what did he want to say? He didn't really know, but he wanted to say something that will keep Athena on the line. Perhaps she'd known and ended the call before he could say anything. After all, she had not spoken with him for such a long time. Perhaps she only cared for Annabeth and he was the channel she could use to reach her daughter. Naruto shook his head and closed his eyes. He didn't want to think about it. He headed up to his room. Every step of the stairway to the second floor was tough. Naruto didn't know what to expect. He had read about the gifts from the gods and the mountains of books he had in his room, but he still had no idea what Athena left for him. Based on their past together, the one thing she would most likely give him was an essay assignment. His mind raced as he listed out the gifts he had read about in his books and pondered the possibility that it may be something affectionate. He knew it was less than probable, but perhaps Athena still thought about him in her immortal life and wanted to give him something to remind him of her. All these possibilities filled his mind, but they were all obliterated when he entered his room. "Hello, Naruto." It was her, still as stunning and brilliant as ever. She was wearing something fitting of her stature as a goddess, a pure white chiton with golden linings. Her feet were bare and there were golden strands decorated in her beautiful black tresses. She smiled at him with more affection than he had ever seen from her. Her gray eyes danced with joy and slight amusement. She looked perfect. Naruto's eyes were dazed for a brief moment before blinked and rubbed his eyes, making Athena frown a little. "It's really me." "Hey Athena," Naruto stared at her in shock as he slowly stepped closer to her. "You're actually here." She nodded with a soft smile, feeling a little sad and guilty. I never thought I'd see you again. You may not see me often, but I constantly watch over you." She stepped closer to him and placed a hand on his cheek, "Both you and Annabeth." Without thinking, Naruto wrapped his arms around Athena and pulled her close. He had dreamed about seeing her again after so long, but he'd never thought it would actually happen. Seeing Athena again really made him realize just how much he had missed her brilliance, her beautiful smile, her warm aura, and even her intimidating gray eyes. He wanted to make sure she was real and was tangible. He wanted to have her in his arms. She felt the same as he would imagine. She was shorter than him with her face leveled with his chest, and she had an amazing scent, one that reminded him of soft roses. "I missed you." Athena was shocked. Other than her father, no one had never been hugged her so tightly and affectionately before. None of the other fathers of her children would dare touch her hand, much less hug her. She thought she would push him away, but she couldn't. All she thought at the moment was how warm and peaceful it felt in his arms and how loved she felt. Then she heard his words. "I missed you," so simple, yet so heavy. She had missed him over the years. She had wondered if he would be angry or resentful of her, but all those worries vanished the moment she felt his arms around her. Naruto gently pulled back from the hug, but still had his hands on her arms. I am. He didn't know what to say. He had thought of many things to say to either Athena or Aphrodite if they were to visit him, but none were coming to mind. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered with a smile. "I missed you, too." "Really?" Athena nodded. "Both Aphrodite and I would often watch you taking care of Annabeth and Lacey, and we would smile every time. You're a great father, Naruto." She lightly traced his cheek as she spoke, making his heart flutter. "It's a shame that you didn't pray to us for so long, but we heard you loud and clear a few nights ago." Naruto smiled and nodded. "Yeah, I understand that part. I have a gift for you, Naruto." Athena snapped her fingers and two items appeared before her, just hovering in the air, one a golden watch and one a golden ring. "This is a gift that I had given Perseus, thousands of years ago." She snapped her fingers again and the watch magically appeared on Naruto's left wrist. "Try tapping the face of the watch twice." Naruto looked at the goddess and nodded before he tapped the face of the watch. Whoa! The watch suddenly morphed into a golden shield the size of a large catering platter and had the face of Medusa emblazed on its face. "Aegis," he whispered. Athena smiled. "You've been reading." He smiled back and nodded. "This is a version of my original Aegis. It is made out of a metal called imperial gold. It is very strong and durable. It will protect you from most, if not all the monsters that will come for our daughter." She snapped her fingers again and the golden ring appeared on his right pinky. "Now try to rub the side of the ring with your right thumb." Oh my gods! As soon as he rubbed the ring a golden spear appeared in his hand. It was taller than his person at about 8 feet long. Its tip was a brilliant gold and was perhaps even more magnificent than its body. The point looked extremely deadly and had a gleam to it that made Naruto feel excited. Imperial gold is a prideful metal, Naruto, and its point will only pierce supernatural beings. It will not harm mortals. The spear will simply ignore simple humans. You are the only normal human who could use it since I have blessed you. Naruto looked at the mother of his child in gratitude. "Thank you, Athena." She shook her head with a small frown. "I should be sorry that this is all I can do. The ancient laws prevent us from helping our children directly, so aiding you is the most I could do." Athena looked into Naruto's azure eyes as she spoke. "Annabeth is my daughter and I love her, but I can only guide her from above. I cannot physically help her." "It's all right," said Naruto with strong conviction. "Annabeth and Lacey are my life, and I will protect them no matter what." Athena smiled proudly. "I know you will. I have downloaded some files onto your personal computer and it includes many styles to use your spear. You can learn from there, and given your brilliant mind for warfare and strategies, I'm sure you'll be able to protect our little girl." "I promise that I will." Athena gave him a sad smile and slowly leaned up to kiss him lightly on the cheek, the first kiss she ever gave him. "I'm sorry for putting so much on your shoulders, but my father, Zeus, is really strict about these matters." Naruto gently wrapped his arms around Athena again and nodded. "I really do understand." She looked up at him in the hug, their faces only an inch apart. "Thank you," she whispered before she kissed him on the cheek again. Naruto knew that she would be leaving soon, he could tell by the look in her eyes. This might be the last time he would ever see Athena, the mother of his eldest daughter and one of the two women he had loved. He decided to just say what he wanted to say. Athena, he started, making her stare into his eyes. His hand slowly reached up and gently cupped her cheek. He felt her flinch a little, but decided to press on. Just this one time, he whispered as Athena nervously breathed out. Will you allow me to kiss the mother of my child? Never in her immortal life had Athena imagined that she would give such an answer. Yes. Then, without another thought, he pressed his lips against hers. Her lips were softer than he had ever imagined. They tasted sweet, a subtle sweet. He held her cheek and softly caressed her flawless face as his other arm held her in place. He slowly moved his lips against hers and pressed further to add more pressure to it. He dared not initiate anything beyond their lips touching, but to his ever shock, he left Athena lick his lips. All that inhibited him vanished in an instant and he responded instantly. His tongue snaked out and immediately made contact with Athena's. The mere thought of that made him weak in the knees. If she tasted subtly sweet before, she tasted like honey now. He wrestled her tongue with his as he pulled her closer, holding her tightly against his chest. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he didn't care. All he wanted to do was to enjoy the kiss as much as he could and make it last as long as he could. So it would until he ran out of breath that he slowly parted their lips. He quickly breathed in again and repeatedly planted a series of small kisses on Athena's lips, his heart skipping a beat every single time they made contact. But he knew that he should stop there. He rested his forehead against hers and opened his eyes. Wow! Then he saw her eyes and the tears welling in them. He grew concerned immediately and was about to ask, but she cut him off. She kissed him again and wrapped her arms around behind his neck. She repeatedly pecked his lips as tenderly as she could before she pulled away. She was panting and her arms were still tangled behind his neck. Her forehead was once again rested against his. Some tears escaped her eyes as she stared into Naruto's shocked and confused, but affectionate and loving eyes. I love you, Naruto, never forget that. She started to glow as she pulled away from the hug, and it was getting brighter and brighter by the second. Naruto was still holding onto her hand and smiled at her. I'll never forget, he replied. I love you, too. There was a bright flash as Athena turned into her divine form and vanished from the room in a brilliant beacon of light, leaving Naruto alone in his room. There was still a smile on his face as he looked down at his new watch and ring, relishing in the fact that Athena watched over them and loved them. I'll never forget about you, Athena. Daddy, Daddy. He rubbed his eyes as a bright smile appeared on his face. It appeared that his daughters had finally noticed that he was gone from the living room. He heard the rumbling of footsteps running up the stairs and he watched as his two girls burst into his room with their new pets in their arms. Lacey jumped into his arms as Annabeth hugged him from the side. Naruto smiled and kissed both of them on the cheek. What is it, girls? Lacey hugged her white kitty and rubbed her face with hers. I named my kitty Toothless. Her father only laughed that she would name her cat after a dragon from her favorite movie. I named mine Einstein. Annabeth looked proud of the name she chose and grinned up at her dad. Perfect, he said as he smiled and hugged both his daughters close, just perfect. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.